On a mild spring evening in April 1997, in a quiet corner of rural Oklahoma, where everyone knew their neighbors and front doors rarely saw locks, a young woman named Jessica Marie Thornton vanished from her own driveway. She was 23 years old, a bank teller with a gentle smile, recently engaged to her high school sweetheart. Her car sat running, driver's door open, purse on the passenger seat, keys still in the ignition. Her fiancé stood on the front porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon, telling authorities he'd only gone inside for a moment to grab his jacket. When he returned, Jessica was gone. No scream. No struggle. No witnesses. Just an empty space where a young woman had been standing 60 seconds before. The question that would haunt McAlester, Oklahoma for the next 26 years was deceptively simple. Where did Jessica Thornton go? And why did the man who claimed to love her most seem so strangely calm when she disappeared? The town of McAlester sits in the southeastern quadrant of Oklahoma, a place where coal mining once fueled the economy and railroad tracks still cut through the center of town like scars across old skin. In 1997, the population hovered around 18,000 souls, most of them connected by blood, marriage, or decades of shared history. This was a community where Friday night football games drew crowds larger than Sunday church services, where the Walmart parking lot served as an informal social hub, where secrets were hard to keep, but some secrets stayed buried for generations. Jessica Thornton had grown up here, graduated from McAlester High School in 1992, and never seriously considered leaving. Her family, the Thorntons, had lived in Pittsburgh County for 4 generations. Her father, Raymond Thornton, worked maintenance at the Oklahoma State Penitentiary just outside town. Her mother, Carol, taught 3rd grade at Jefferson Elementary. They lived in a modest brick ranch house on Choctaw Avenue, the kind of neighborhood where children rode bicycles until streetlights flickered on and neighbors waved from front porches. Jessica worked at First National Bank on Main Street, occupying the second teller window from the door. Customers knew her by name. She counted change with practiced efficiency, remembered birthdays, asked about grandchildren. On her lunch breaks, she walked 2 blocks to the Sonic Drive-In, always ordering the same thing, a grilled cheese sandwich and cherry limeade. Her coworkers described her as dependable, soft-spoken, the type who volunteered for extra shifts and never complained. She wore her dark blonde hair in a simple ponytail most days, favored modest floral dresses, and kept a photograph of her fiancé taped inside her cash drawer. That fiancé, Travis Eugene Caldwell, was 25 years old, a mechanic at Patterson's Auto Repair on Highway 69. They had dated since Jessica's junior year of high school, breaking up twice over the years, but always finding their way back together. Travis proposed on Valentine's Day 1997, presenting a modest diamond ring at the Olive Garden in Ada, 45 minutes north. Jessica said yes. They set a wedding date for October, planning a ceremony at First Baptist Church followed by a reception in the Fellowship Hall. April 19, 1997, began like most Saturdays in that part of Oklahoma. The temperature climbed into the low 70s by noon, a gentle warmth after weeks of unpredictable spring storms. Clouds scattered across a pale blue sky. Dogwoods bloomed white and pink along residential streets. Jessica worked the morning shift at the bank, 8 until noon, then drove her 1994 Chevrolet Cavalier home to the apartment she and Travis shared on East Adams Avenue, a small 2-bedroom unit in a complex that housed mostly young couples and retirees. Clear's throat. She changed into jeans and a white t-shirt, pulled her hair into a ponytail, and spent the afternoon doing laundry and watching television. Travis came home around 4:30, his work uniform stained with motor oil and grease. He showered, dressed in clean clothes, and suggested they drive out to his parents' property in the country to check on some repairs his father had been making to an old barn. Jessica agreed. This was routine for them. Most weekends included trips to see family, helping with projects, sharing meals. They left their apartment at approximately 5:45 in the evening, taking Travis's 1989 Ford pickup truck, because the roads leading to the Caldwell property were rough gravel, prone to washing out after heavy rains. The drive took 20 minutes, heading east on Highway 270 before turning onto a series of county roads that wound through pasture land and thick stands of oak and pine. The Caldwell property consisted of 47 acres inherited by Travis's father, Donald Caldwell, from his own father decades earlier. The land held a small frame house, a detached garage, a barn in perpetual need of repair, and a scattering of rusted farm equipment slowly being reclaimed by prairie grass and kudzu. Donald and his wife Sharon lived there full-time, raising chickens and keeping a vegetable garden, living the quiet rural existence that seemed increasingly anachronistic even in 1997. Travis and Jessica arrived at the property around 6:15. Sharon Caldwell greeted them at the door, wiping flour-dusted hands on her apron. Donald was out back, she said, working on the barn's rotted supports. They visited for perhaps 20 minutes, making small talk about wedding plans and the upcoming planting season. Travis mentioned needing to get back to town before full dark. They said their goodbyes. What happened next would be reconstructed from fragments, testimony, and the careful examination of timelines that didn't quite align. Travis would later tell authorities that they left his parents' house around 6:45. He drove. Jessica sat in the passenger seat, quiet, watching the landscape roll past. They stopped once, Travis said, at a small convenience store called Miller's Stop and Go on County Road 1470, about 12 miles from the Caldwell property. He went inside to buy cigarettes and a soda. Jessica stayed in the truck. The clerk at Miller's, a teenager named Dustin Reynolds, would later confirm that Travis Caldwell came into the store that evening, purchased a pack of Marlboro Reds and a Dr. Pepper, paid cash, and left. Dustin couldn't recall the exact time, but guessed it was sometime between 7 and 7:30. He didn't see anyone in the truck outside. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the parking lot. Travis said they continued driving home, arriving at their apartment complex on East Adams Avenue just as full darkness settled over McAllister. He parked in their assigned spot, number 17, directly in front of their ground floor unit. Hear the story fragments further. Travis told investigators that Jessica got out of the truck first. She walked toward their apartment door while he lingered by the truck, intending to retrieve some tools from the bed. He heard her call back to him, something about forgetting her purse inside earlier, something mundane that he couldn't quite remember word for word. He turned toward the truck bed, rummaging through toolboxes. When he looked up again, perhaps 60 seconds later, Jessica's car was running. The driver's side door stood open. The interior light glowed pale yellow in the growing darkness, but Jessica herself was nowhere in sight. Travis called her name. No response. He walked to the Cavalier, looked inside, saw her purse on the passenger seat, her keys dangling from the ignition. The engine hummed steadily. He walked around the vehicle, checked the backseat, called her name again louder. Other residents of the apartment complex were arriving home from weekend errands, pulling into parking spaces, carrying grocery bags. Nobody had seen Jessica. Nobody had heard anything unusual. Travis claimed he initially thought she'd run back inside their apartment for something she'd forgotten. He walked to their door, found it locked, used his key to open it. The apartment was empty. Dark, untouched from how they'd left it hours earlier. The laundry she'd folded that afternoon still sat in a basket on the couch. The television was off. No lights burned. He returned outside, now genuinely confused. He checked the Cavalier again, as if Jessica might have somehow reappeared in those brief moments. She hadn't. He walked the perimeter of the parking lot, peering between vehicles, calling her name into the warm evening air. Other residents began to notice his agitation. A neighbor named Patricia Monroe, who lived 3 units down, approached and asked if everything was all right. Travis told her Jessica had vanished. Patricia frowned, confused by the phrasing. "What do you mean vanished?" she asked. Travis explained, his voice reportedly calm, almost matter-of-fact, that Jessica had been there one moment and gone the next. Patricia suggested perhaps she'd walked to the complex's laundry room or gone to visit a neighbor. Travis shook his head. Jessica's car was running. Her purse was inside. Nothing made sense. By 7:55, Travis called the McAlester Police Department from the landline inside their apartment. The dispatcher who took the call, a woman named Linda Chavez who had worked for the department for 14 years, would later testify about the tenor of that conversation. Travis reported his fiancée missing. He provided her name, physical description, what she'd been wearing. Linda asked standard questions. How long had Jessica been missing? Travis said maybe 20 minutes, perhaps a bit more. Had they argued? No, Travis said everything had been fine. Did Jessica have a history of leaving without warning? No, never. Did she have friends or family she might have gone to visit? Travis listed Jessica's parents, her younger sister, a few close friends, but insisted none of that made sense given that her car and purse remained at the apartment. Linda asked if Travis wanted an officer to come take a report. Travis said yes. Linda dispatched Officer Marcus Webb to the address. Officer Webb arrived at 8:13, according to official records. He was 31 years old, a 7-year veteran of the McAlester Police Department, accustomed to domestic disturbances, noise complaints, the occasional vehicle theft. Missing person reports, especially involving adults who'd been gone less than an hour, rarely resulted in immediate action. Adults had the right to leave. Arguments happened. People stormed off, cooled down, came back. But something about this situation struck Webb as unusual from the moment he stepped out of his patrol car. Travis Caldwell stood in the parking lot, hands in his pockets, expression blank. Jessica's Cavalier still sat with the driver's door open, keys in the ignition, engine running. Webb approached, introduced himself, and began asking questions. Travis repeated the same account he'd given the dispatcher. Webb took notes, writing in the practiced shorthand of police reports. He examined the Cavalier, shined his flashlight across the seats, noted the purse, the lack of any signs of struggle or disturbance. He asked Travis to walk him through the timeline again, paying attention to small details. What time did they leave his parents' house? What time did they stop at the convenience store? What time did they arrive home? Travis provided answers, but Webb noticed the times were approximate, vague, shifting slightly with each retelling. Not dramatically, but enough to register in Webb's mind as worth noting. Webb radioed for backup, requesting additional units to canvass the apartment complex and surrounding area. Within 20 minutes, 4 more officers arrived, along with a sergeant named Raymond Polk, who had worked missing persons cases before. Polk took command of the scene, organizing officers to knock on doors, question residents, search common areas, parking lots, the small wooded area behind the complex. Travis stood near his truck, smoking cigarettes, answering the same questions repeatedly as different officers rotated through. He maintained the same calm demeanor throughout, showing little visible emotion beyond mild confusion and concern. Sergeant Polk found this notable. In his experience, family members of missing persons typically displayed more obvious distress. Tears, panic, anger, insistence on joining the search. Travis seemed almost resigned, passive, waiting for someone else to find answers he claimed not to have. By 9:30, officers had questioned most of the apartment complex residents. Nobody had seen Jessica after Travis, and she arrived home. Nobody had heard screams, arguments, or vehicles leaving quickly. A woman named Denise Campbell, who lived directly above Travis and Jessica's unit, said she'd been home all evening and hadn't heard anything unusual. She noted that sound carried easily through the thin floors, and she often heard the couple below moving around, talking, watching television. That evening had been quiet until she heard Travis walking around calling Jessica's name. Sergeant Polk authorized notification to Jessica's family. Officer Webb drove to the Thornton residence on Choctaw Avenue and knocked on the door at 9:54. Raymond and Carol Thornton answered together, immediately sensing bad news from the presence of a uniformed officer at their door after dark. Webb explained the situation carefully, watching their reactions. Carol Thornton's face went pale. Stanford demanded details, asked questions Webb couldn't answer, insisted on driving immediately to the apartment complex. They arrived within 15 minutes, Carol still wearing her house slippers, Raymond in the same work clothes he'd worn all day. The Thorntons' arrival changed the atmosphere at the scene. Carol wept openly, clutching her husband's arm, asking everyone within earshot where her daughter could be. Raymond confronted Travis directly, his voice rising with each question. What happened? Where is she? What did you do? Travis maintained his composure, repeating his account without significant variation. Raymond's suspicion was immediate and visceral, the instinctive mistrust of a father who never quite believed any man was good enough for his daughter. Sergeant Polk intervened, separating Travis and Raymond, suggesting it would be more productive to focus on finding Jessica rather than assigning blame. The search expanded. Officers drove slowly through surrounding neighborhoods, spotlighting yards, alleys, dumpsters. The Oklahoma Highway Patrol was notified and began monitoring roadways. Jessica's photograph, taken from her employee badge at First National Bank, was circulated to neighboring jurisdictions. By midnight, more than 30 people were actively searching, including off-duty officers who'd heard about the case and volunteered their time. Travis remained at the apartment complex throughout the night, though Sergeant Polk strongly suggested he might be more comfortable waiting at the police station. Travis declined, saying he wanted to be present when Jessica came back. The phrasing caught Polk's attention, not if she came back but when, an assumption of return rather than rescue. Small linguistic tells that meant nothing individually but accumulated into a pattern. Clear's throat. Around 2 in the morning, the decision was made to bring in tracking dogs at first light. The Pittsburgh County Sheriff's Department maintained a K-9 unit trained in search and rescue operations. Sergeant Polk also contacted the Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation, requesting assistance from their Missing Persons Division. A case involving a young woman who vanished from her own parking lot with no apparent motive or opportunity would require resources beyond what the McAlester Police Department could provide alone. Dawn broke cold and gray on April 20th. The search resumed with renewed intensity. 2 German shepherds arrived with their handlers, deputies from the sheriff's department who specialized in tracking. They used clothing from Jessica's laundry basket to establish scent, then began working outward from the Cavalier. The dogs showed interest in a trail leading from the parking lot toward the street, but lost the scent within 100 yards. Near a storm drain and a patch of asphalt where dozens of vehicles passed daily. The handlers explained that rain earlier in the week had likely compromised any scent trail, and the heavy vehicle traffic in the area made tracking nearly impossible. They tried again, starting from different points, but achieved no meaningful results. The dogs could confirm Jessica had been in the parking lot, which everyone already knew, but couldn't determine where she'd gone from there. By midday Sunday, the community mobilized in force. Word spread through churches, across phone trees, via the local radio station which interrupted regular programming to announce the situation. Volunteers gathered at the McAllister High School gymnasium, where Sergeant Polk established a command center. More than 200 people showed up, ready to search. They were organized into teams of 8 to 10, given maps of assigned sectors, instructed to look for anything unusual: disturbed earth, abandoned clothing, any sign of Jessica, or evidence of what might have happened. Teams fanned out across McAllister and the surrounding countryside, walking fields, searching ditches, checking abandoned buildings. Local businesses donated food and coffee. The Red Cross arrived with a mobile unit. Television news crews from Tulsa and Oklahoma City set up cameras, interviewing anyone willing to talk. Raymond and Carol Thornton appeared on camera, Carol barely able to speak through tears, Raymond pleading for information, offering a reward of $5,000 for Jessica's safe return. Travis participated in the search efforts, joining a team assigned to comb through wooded areas east of town. Those who searched alongside him offered conflicting observations. Some said he seemed genuinely concerned, working as hard as anyone else, calling Jessica's name, checking beneath brush and fallen logs. Others found his demeanor off-putting, too controlled, insufficiently emotional for someone whose fiancé had vanished without trace. A volunteer named Corinne Whitfield, who taught at the same elementary school as Carol Thornton, later said Travis seemed like he was going through the motions, performing the role of concerned fiancé without actually inhabiting it. She noticed he never seemed surprised when searches turned up nothing, never expressed frustration or despair. He simply moved methodically from one area to the next, hour after hour, his expression unchanging. Investigators began conducting formal interviews, bringing people to the police station for recorded statements. Travis was interviewed 3 times over the course of Sunday and Monday. Detective Sarah Kemper, who had recently joined the McAllister Police Department after working 8 years with the Tulsa Police, led the questioning. She focused on establishing a detailed timeline, pushing Travis to be more specific about times, routes, stops. She asked about his relationship with Jessica, whether they'd been experiencing problems, whether Jessica had seemed upset or distressed recently. Travis maintained they were happy, planning a wedding, looking forward to their future together. When pressed about the stop at Miller's Stop and Go, Travis said they'd been there maybe 10 or 15 minutes. Detective Kemper noted this conflicted with what the clerk Dustin Reynolds had reported. A single customer who came in, made a quick purchase, and left. She asked Travis what he'd been doing for 10 or 15 minutes at a small convenience store. Travis became vague, said maybe he'd misremembered the time, maybe it had been shorter. These inconsistencies, minor individually, accumulated into reasonable doubt. The physical evidence provided no clear answers. Jessica's Cavalier was processed thoroughly, photographed, dusted for fingerprints, searched for anything that might indicate where she'd gone or who she'd been with. The only prints found belonged to Jessica herself and Travis. No signs of struggle, no blood, no torn fabric or broken jewelry suggesting violence. Her purse contained her wallet with $63 cash, credit cards, identification, photographs. Her keys included apartment key, car key, office key from the bank, and a decorative keychain shaped like a cat that her sister had given her for Christmas. Everything suggested a person who intended to return momentarily, not someone planning to disappear. Travis's truck underwent similar scrutiny. Again, nothing unusual emerged. Investigators checked his work schedule, confirmed he'd been at Patterson's auto repair on Friday, spoken with coworkers who said he'd seemed normal, maybe a bit distracted but nothing alarming. The convenience store stop became a focal point. Detective Kemper drove to Miller's Stop and Go on Tuesday morning, timing the route from the Caldwell property. Taking the most direct path at legal speed limits, the drive required 17 minutes. Travis had said they left his parents' house around 6:45 and stopped at the store on the way home. Dustin Reynolds estimated Travis came into the store sometime between 7 and 7:30, probably closer to 7:30 based on when his shift was winding down and he was preparing to close. The math didn't quite work. If Travis and Jessica left at 6:45, they should have reached Miller's by 7:02, not 7:30. Where were those missing 28 minutes? Detective Kemper asked Travis about this directly during his third interview. He couldn't explain the discrepancy, suggested maybe they'd left his parents' house later than he remembered, or maybe the store clerk's timing was off. When Kemper pointed out that his mother Sharon Caldwell had specifically mentioned them leaving around 6:45 because she'd checked the kitchen clock, Travis became defensive. Said everyone's memories were approximate, that he couldn't be expected to remember exact minutes from a day that had seemed entirely ordinary until Jessica disappeared. Investigators drove every possible route between the Caldwell property and Miller's Stop and Go, searching for anywhere Travis might have stopped, any reason for the missing time. They found nothing compelling: empty fields, dense woods, a few private driveways leading to isolated houses. They considered the possibility that Travis had stopped somewhere, that something had happened there, that Jessica had never actually made it to the apartment complex alive. But there was no evidence. No body, no witnesses, no physical proof of any crime, and Travis's story, while containing troubling inconsistencies, never changed dramatically enough to constitute an obvious lie. He seemed to genuinely struggle to remember exact times, exact routes, exact sequences of events, or he was performing struggle convincingly. Jessica's friends and coworkers were interviewed extensively. They painted a picture of a young woman who seemed happy, excited about her upcoming wedding, showing no signs of wanting to run away or disappear. Her sister, Melissa Thornton, told investigators that Jessica had called her the Wednesday before she vanished, talking enthusiastically about bridesmaid dresses and honeymoon plans. Jessica wanted to go to Florida, had never seen the ocean, dreamed of walking on a beach at sunset. Melissa said her sister seemed more content than she'd been in years, that the on-again, off-again turbulence of her relationship with Travis had finally settled into stability. When asked if Travis had ever been violent or threatening, Melissa hesitated before answering. She said Travis had a temper, that Jessica had mentioned a few arguments that had gotten heated, but never suggested physical violence. The hesitation registered with investigators. Something left unsaid, something Melissa knew or suspected but wouldn't articulate. One of Jessica's co-workers at First National Bank, a woman named Brenda Mills who worked the teller window beside Jessica's, provided information that deepened investigators' suspicions. Brenda said Jessica had confided that Travis had become increasingly jealous and possessive in recent months. He called the bank multiple times during Jessica's shifts, always with some excuse, asking what time she'd be home, whether she wanted him to pick up dinner, reminding her of some errand or appointment. Brenda thought the frequency of calls was excessive, controlling. She'd commented on it once and Jessica had laughed it off, saying Travis just missed her when they were apart. But Brenda noticed Jessica's smile didn't quite reach her eyes when she said it. Brenda also mentioned that Travis sometimes waited in the bank parking lot at the end of Jessica's shift, sitting in his truck, watching the door. Though Jessica had her own car and didn't need a ride, When Detective Kemper asked why Brenda was sharing this information now, if she'd found it concerning then, Brenda said she hadn't wanted to presume, hadn't wanted to make judgments about someone else's relationship. But now, with Jessica missing, those small observations felt suddenly significant. The investigation expanded to consider other possibilities. Could Jessica have been taken by a stranger? The parking lot of the apartment complex offered some visibility from surrounding units, but also patches of shadow, blind spots where someone could have grabbed her, forced her into a vehicle, driven away before anyone noticed. But this theory created as many questions as it answered. Why would Jessica have gotten out of Travis's truck and immediately walked to her own car, started it, opened the door, if she'd simply arrived home from a routine drive? What were the chances a random abductor was present in that exact moment, in that specific location, ready to seize an opportunity that might last only seconds? And why leave her purse, her keys, her running vehicle, all evidence that would immediately alert people to her absence? Detective Kemper considered every scenario, no matter how unlikely, but the simplest explanation kept returning. Something happened to Jessica before she ever reached that parking lot. And the person who knew what happened was the same person who'd been with her when it occurred. By the end of April, search efforts had covered hundreds of square miles. Helicopters equipped with thermal imaging flew grid patterns over rural areas. Dive teams checked ponds, lakes, the nearby Kiamichi River. Cadaver dogs were brought in, specialized animals trained to detect the scent of human remains. They alerted in several locations, but each time subsequent excavation revealed dead livestock, buried household pets, false positives. No trace of Jessica Thornton emerged. The Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation assigned 2 special agents to work the case full-time, interviewing everyone even tangentially connected to Jessica or Travis, building comprehensive timelines, searching for any crack in Travis's account that might widen into revelation. Travis cooperated with every request, submitted to polygraph examination, allowed investigators to search his apartment, his truck, his parents' property, his workplace. The polygraph results were inconclusive, indicating deception on some questions, but not others, ultimately too ambiguous to provide definitive direction. As spring turned to summer, public interest began to wane. Missing person flyers faded in storefront windows, bleached by sun and stained by rain. News coverage diminished, replaced by other tragedies, other mysteries. The Thornton family held a memorial service at First Baptist Church in early June, though Carol Thornton refused to use the word funeral. A funeral implied certainty of loss. This was simply a gathering to pray for Jessica's return, to keep her memory present in the community's consciousness. More than 400 people attended, filling the sanctuary and overflowing into the fellowship hall. Travis sat in the back, alone, while the Thornton family occupied the front pews. The division between them was absolute. Raymond Thornton refused to speak to Travis, convinced beyond doubt that the man his daughter had planned to marry knew exactly what happened to her. But knowing and proving remained 2 different things entirely. Months accumulated into years. The case remained technically open but effectively dormant. Detective Kemper reviewed the file periodically, hoping fresh eyes might reveal something previously missed. Nothing emerged. Travis Caldwell continued working at Patterson's Auto Repair, living in the same apartment on East Adams Avenue for several months, before moving to a small rental house on the north side of McAlester. He dated occasionally, never seriously, always telling prospective partners about Jessica's disappearance early in the relationship. Some women found his openness reassuring, evidence of nothing to hide. Others were disturbed by his apparent lack of affect when discussing his missing fiancée, the way he could describe the events of April 19th. 1997, with the emotional detachment of someone recounting a movie plot rather than personal tragedy. Friends from high school gradually stopped calling. Coworkers maintained professional distance. He became a person others whispered about, a man shadowed by unproven suspicion. Those who knew him said Travis seemed unchanged by Jessica's disappearance, at least outwardly. He went to work, came home, maintained his truck, mowed his lawn, lived a life of deliberate ordinariness. But there were moments, small glimpses, when something darker flickered beneath the surface. A former coworker named James Patterson, nephew of the shop owner, recalled Travis having nightmares during the brief period they lived together as roommates in 1999. James woke several nights to hear Travis talking in his sleep, saying, "I'm sorry," over and over, sometimes adding, "I didn't mean to," in a voice that sounded younger, more vulnerable than his waking self. When James asked about it the next morning, Travis claimed he didn't remember dreaming, dismissed it as meaningless sleep talking. But it happened regularly enough that James began to wonder what guilt might live in his roommate's subconscious mind. What truth struggled to surface, even as Travis's conscious self maintained absolute denial. The Thornton family fractured under the weight of unresolved grief. Carol Thornton descended into depression, unable to return to her teaching position, spending days in Jessica's childhood bedroom, surrounded by photographs and mementos from a life that ended with brutal abruptness. Raymond threw himself into work, volunteering for extra shifts, avoiding home where every object and room reminded him of his missing daughter. Their younger daughter, Melissa, moved to Dallas in 2000, unable to bear the constant sorrow that permeated their house. She visited infrequently, calls growing less frequent as she tried to build a life not defined by her sister's absence. Carol and Raymond's marriage became a partnership of shared grief rather than mutual support, two people drowning together because neither had strength to save the other. For those who have ever doubted someone you love, who have felt suspicion coil in your gut while your heart insists on innocence, who have watched someone close to you carry secrets they'll never share, the Thornton family's experience offers no comfort. They knew, or thought they knew, what happened to Jessica. They believed it with a certainty that transcended evidence. But belief and proof exist in different realms, and the justice system properly requires the latter. So they waited, years stretched into decades. April 19th became an annual day of private mourning. Jessica's bedroom remained unchanged, a shrine to interrupted potential. Carol lit a candle each evening, placing it in the front window, a beacon for a daughter who would never find her way home. In 2003, Detective Sarah Kemper left the McAlester Police Department to take a position with the Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation. Before she departed, she wrote a detailed memo summarizing her thoughts on the Jessica Thornton case. She noted every inconsistency, every troubling detail, every reason she believed Travis Caldwell knew more than he'd admitted. She acknowledged the lack of evidence, the absence of body, the impossibility of prosecution without proof. But she ended the memo with a prediction. Someday, somehow, the truth would emerge. Secrets rarely stayed buried forever. Someone always talked. Something always surfaced. The memo sat in the case file, gathering dust, waiting. The years 2004 through 2020 passed without significant development. The case remained in McAlester's collective memory, especially among older residents who remembered when it happened, but younger generations knew nothing of Jessica Thornton. The apartment complex on East Adams Avenue changed ownership twice. The parking space where Jessica's car had been found running saw hundreds of different vehicles occupy it over the years. Life continued, indifferent to the mystery that had briefly consumed the community. Travis Caldwell lived his quiet existence, working steadily at Patterson's auto repair until the shop closed in 2015, then finding similar work at a garage in Krebs, 12 miles northeast. He never married, never had children, never seemed to form lasting connections with anyone. To casual observers, he was simply a solitary middle-aged man, unremarkable, forgettable. But secrets rarely stay buried forever. In March 2023, 26 years after Jessica Thornton vanished, a woman named Angela Whitmore walked into the Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation field office in McAlester. She was 41 years old, a paralegal working for a law firm in Durant, Oklahoma. She told the receptionist she had information about an old case, something she should have come forward with decades earlier, but hadn't for reasons she would explain. The agent who met with her was named Marcus Chen, a 13-year veteran of the OSBI who specialized in cold cases. Angela sat across from him in an interview room, hands shaking slightly, and began to speak. In the spring of 1997, Angela had been 15 years old, a sophomore at McAlester High School. She lived with her mother and stepfather in a house on County Road 1545, roughly 3 miles from the Caldwell family property. On the evening of April 19th, Angela had been riding her bicycle along the county road, enjoying the warm weather, in no particular hurry to get home. Around 7:15, she saw a truck parked on the shoulder near a narrow dirt access road that led into dense woods. The truck was a late 80s Ford, dark blue, with a primer-patched fender. A man stood near the truck bed, his back to the road. Angela slowed her bicycle, curious but not alarmed. As she passed, the man turned slightly. She glimpsed his face, recognized him as someone she'd seen around town, though she didn't know his name. The man watched her ride past, his expression unreadable. Angela continued down the road, looking back once to see the man still standing there motionless. She thought little of it at the time. People parked on county roads regularly, checking cattle, fixing fence lines, or simply enjoying the evening. But later that night, Angela's mother mentioned that a young woman from McAlester had gone missing, had vanished from her apartment complex under mysterious circumstances. Over subsequent days, as news coverage intensified and Jessica Thornton's face appeared on television screens and missing person flyers, Angela began to feel increasingly uneasy. She saw Travis Caldwell interviewed on the local news, recognized him immediately as the man she'd seen standing by the truck on County Road 1545. She mentioned this to her mother, who dismissed it as coincidence. Travis had been driving home from his parents' house. His route would have taken him along county roads. There was nothing inherently suspicious about seeing him there. Angela wanted to call police, but her mother forbade it, worried about getting involved, about potential backlash if Angela's information proved meaningless, or, worse, if it implicated them somehow in the investigation. Angela's stepfather agreed. They ordered her to say nothing. Angela complied, a 15-year-old girl following parental directives, but the decision haunted her for 26 years. She watched from a distance as the case consumed McAlester, as searches covered hundreds of square miles of countryside, as the Thornton family's grief became public spectacle. She knew the exact location where she'd seen Travis, could have directed investigators to a specific stretch of road, a specific access point into woods that perhaps hadn't been searched as thoroughly as they should have been. But she remained silent, first from obedience, then from guilt and fear that coming forward years later would make her culpable, complicit in the failure to find Jessica Thornton. Her mother had passed away in 2019. Her stepfather lived in a nursing home, his memory destroyed by Alzheimer's. There was no one left to forbid her from speaking now, and the weight of secret knowledge had become unbearable. Agent Chen listened carefully, taking detailed notes. He asked Angela to describe exactly where she'd seen the truck, what time of evening, what the man had been doing. Angela provided everything she could remember, acknowledging that 26 years had blurred some details while crystallizing others. Chen thanked her, took her contact information, and immediately began the process of reopening the Jessica Thornton case. He pulled the original file, spent days reviewing every interview, every search report, every piece of evidence collected in 1997. He drove out to County Road 1545, used Angela's description to locate the approximate spot where she'd seen Travis's truck. The access road remained, now overgrown with vegetation, barely visible from the main road. Chen walked into the woods, noting how dense the tree cover was, how isolated, how perfect a location would be for someone wanting absolute privacy. The OSBI assembled a team, including forensic specialists, cadaver dogs, ground-penetrating radar operators. In early May 2023, they converged on the woods off County Road 1545 and began systematic searching. The dogs alerted within 3 hours, indicating a specific area approximately 200 yards from the road, in a shallow depression surrounded by oak trees. Ground-penetrating radar showed an anomaly in the soil, a disturbance suggesting something had been buried there. Excavation began carefully, investigators working with small tools, brushing away dirt inch by inch. On May 8, 2023, 26 years and 19 days after Jessica Thornton disappeared, they found her.